On to the first video of the day, because what else would I do with the first 2 hours of free time I've had in a week? This is one inspired by my last video. I wanted to talk about ways you can research a donor. So I've advised them in many ways. One thing I offer to do is to research a donor online and see what I can find. The reason I've done this is because occasionally I find some very interesting information. About two-thirds to three-fourths of the time, I don't find anything very relevant about donor at all. But on occasions, I've found things such as donors admitting to being married and not informed of the rights they're donating, donors lying about their age or their education, very relevant details at times. And so even though the majority of the time I don't find anything all that useful, I still consider it worth doing for those occasions when I do find something very important. But for all the research I do, the truth is it's not that difficult. So I wanted to advise everyone else how they can research a donor online and the steps I take when I do this kind of research. So the first thing you need when you research your donors is you need to make sure that you're committing to verifying that you're actually looking at your donor's information. It's possible to find information about someone else who has the same name or username as your donor and to think you're looking at your donor. For instance, one woman, I said something about how to research donors online. She came back 5 minutes later and said, "I think my donor is a killer." I said, "What?" She said, "Yes, I researched his name online and I found someone with the same name who's in prison." So, okay, if he's in prison, he's probably not donating to you. There's a donor with the same name, or an individual having the same name for a donor, but was not her donor. So you need to actually make sure you're verifying that the information you find actually belongs to your donor and not leaping to conclusions, because it's very easy to presume facts about a donor that aren't necessarily accurate if you don't verify. So the way you verify is you take a few details, you try to verify age, location, ideally a photo, things like that, details about your donor that aren't that hard to find when you research someone else to get confirmation. So what do you research on a donor? But the two huge things, the things that present 90% of all hits and are quick to do, research their username and their email. The username, I mean the username on known donor registry or whatever website they're on. You research that, and you Google their email. These two things bring up the vast majority of all information I find about donors online. Email is great because email uniquely identifies the donor. No one else has the same email address as your donor. So if you Google their email address and you find something, you know you're looking at your donor. Username's a little more difficult. Lots of donors will reuse the same username everywhere. For instance, I use RawRanks a few places. It's my donor name. It's my name that I'm using when I make these logs. And I use it a few other places that are related. I also have another name, dsolemn, that I use for everything non-donor related out there. And so if you know that I use dsolemn in one location, you can find a ton of other information. You can find out I did lateral thinking puzzles on a forum over here, and you can find out that I post on various web comics that I read over here, and you can just find out all kinds of random junk that I've done online. So you want to Google the username that the donor is using to see what comes up. Now, how effective this is depends on how unique the name is. If the donor's name is Bob98, a lot of people can have that name. If it's Ferraris are cool, that's not unique enough. It's very possible that other people pick the same username. So just because you find someone who's using the same username, that may not actually be your donor. The more unique a name is, for instance, my name RawRanks, that's pretty unique. You'd be relatively comfortable in presuming anywhere you go online, you find the name RawRanks, it's probably me. because no one else uses that name. So I suggest Googling those. With username, you want to verify you actually look your donor. Get photos, check age and location. A lot of times when donors are in forums and discuss things on forums, you can find age and location somewhere in their profile information. Get other details confirmed. And if, for instance, you have confirmed that your donor used this username in 2 or 3 other sites, you can be more confident when you find someone with that username on another site. You can have a higher degree of confidence that this is actually a donor. Likewise, if you find a donor via the username and you find, if you use their email address to find things that donors posted and donors posted on a website using a different username, then go and research that username. Anytime you find a new username you can associate with your donor, you can then Google that username to research them. And that's really 9% of how I find all my hits. And usually it's very obvious when I found something. It's actually simple. Google and look. The biggest thing I do is I make sure that I don't leap to conclusions, particularly in the username. You really want to make sure that you're actually looking at your donor, not just someone else having to pick the same username. You can also research a donor's name. It's much harder to find out useful information from this, and it takes a lot more effort, a little bit more intelligence. You're far more likely to run into people with the same name that is not your donor. And all the time that I've done research on names, I can only think of one instance where I found something really relevant by searching the name. I also happen to know that if you research my name online, you'll actually find some relevant information. Okay, actually, I can think of 2 times I found information about donors. So on rare occasions, researching a donor's full name will also find something, but not that often. I generally suggest typing in the full name, do a quick search, see if anything immediately shows up on the top that's notable enough, and if so, putting in effort to verify if it's the same individual, but don't pursue name too much because it's very easy to be looking at a different person who happens to have the same name, and it's a lot harder to find anything truly relevant to your search. But with these basic steps, you can find out quite a bit of information. Sometimes, like I said, 2/3 of times you'll find nothing. One other thing that I mentioned in my last video that kind of inspired me to write this one, you want to verify facts for donor claims. If your donor says that he did something in the past that sounds somewhat memorable, research it. If he claims to have competed in a competition, Google it. If he says he volunteered for some obscure charity, look up the charity. If he says he started a charity, look it up. And a lot of claims can be easily researched online, particularly if he says he worked for someplace. I've seen donors who claim to own companies. Okay, Google the company, verify the name. Certainly, if a donor claims to own a company or something, you also want to make absolutely certain you verify their name, that they're not just using the name of the president of the company. Not that I've ever actually seen a donor do that. That's probably me being overly careful, but it's easy enough to verify a name by asking for a driver's license or something. So just to be safe, go ahead and verify it. One thing you will find if you do research like this, there's a decent chance you'll find your donor on a porn site. In fact, the most common porn site will be a pregnancy fetish porn site. Yes, there's quite a few donors on pregnancy fetish and or incest porn sites. And believe it or not, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Not that it's a good thing, but I would not hold it against a donor. Most men view pornography. I'll admit I have viewed pornography. And people have their own interests. Sometimes they're bizarre. Sometimes you don't understand them. Sadly, being a geek who spends a lot of time online, I know more than I want to know about a lot of really bizarre fetishes out there. Everyone has their own little things that are interesting to them, and as long as they're just fantasies, they don't necessarily do any harm. So just because a donor happens to post on a pornography site, even if it's a type of pornography that seems unusual to you, I would not hold that against your donor. Everyone does it. Just because you have to catch your donor doing it doesn't mean that every other donor that you speak to may not also have been on similar sites. Most common, I said, is the pregnancy fetish sites. I know that does creep some women out, but it's very common. As long as the donor is trying to do what's right for you, the fact that he may also be on certain sites may not necessarily be a negative. I would still maybe read what he posts a little bit, but just most donors view those things. Don't, just because you happen to catch one do it, don't presume he's somehow worse than the others who are probably on some kind of site as well, be it whatever thing he happens to enjoy, and you just don't know about it. I mention this only because I know some women have found donors on sites like this and immediately got creeped out and refused to use them when you would not believe how many donors are on these sites. If I find information about a donor, there's a good chance at least a 1 in 3 chance I found them on some kind of pornography site. The one thing you do want to be worried about is when they are on sites that are mentioning or describing casual sex, because it might be an STD risk. For instance, I found a few donors on a site called FuckBook. Yeah, it exists. And you can list what kinds of sex you're interested in, and casual sex and group sex are options. If a donor has those checked, I would see those as potential signs that he's actively looking for sex, which means a higher risk that he may be contracting STDs. You need far more recent STD tests. You need to consider the potential STD risk. But just because they are on a site and have whatever fantasies by themselves are not harmful. So really, that's most of what I do when I research donors. Don't be afraid to ask for details about any claims a donor has in order to find them. I already used this example once. When I tell women that I donate my kidney to a child, that's a very memorable detail. That's something that probably exists, that I can probably verify somehow. At the very least, you'd think, well, surely I should be able to look up the site, the hospital where he donated, and to have something about it. As it just so happens, the hospital where I donate my kidney does keep a list of names of everyone who donated their organs, but when I was told that, I had envisioned like big letters, very visible, just a sheet of paper somewhere. It was nowhere near as impressive as I had envisioned in my mind when they said, yeah, we keep the names of all our donors on our walls. But anyways, if I make a claim like that, you want to verify that. That's something that somehow can probably be verified online. You want to come and say, can you prove that? Do you have some kind of link? Which I do. If you type the words Drew Kidney into Google, you can find it. Don't be afraid whenever a donor makes a particularly interesting or memorable claim. Ask yourself, is this the sort of thing that would be documented online? And if it would be, ask the donor, can you link to this? That's a very good way to catch when donors are dishonest. They tend to make very large claims that are fairly easily disproven online with minimal effort, so definitely do it. Keep in mind though, occasionally some things might be hard to find. Like in my case, apparently a non-directed donation is more memorable than I thought, and they actually did some videos on it. If I had said that I donated my kidney to my best friend from college or something, that would have been a lot harder for me to actually prove it. I probably could have found something on their website proving it, but it would have taken a little bit more effort. So put in some thoughts. How likely is it that what they claim could actually be found online? Some people might be a little bit more computer geeky like me, have a good idea whether or not something should be easy to find online. Some may not. But at least ask them if they can provide proof. And the more that they're involved in something that's official, like competitions, the more likely that some kind of proof should exist. And I suggest always doing this. No matter how great you feel about a donor, always research them. Yeah, I suppose that's all I really do. For all the effort I put into it, it sounds so simple once I spell it out. If anyone needs help doing this, they can ask me, and I'm actually happy to try researching donors online myself. Oh, the other thing you can do on KDR, that's Known Donor Registry, if you're using a donor from there, I suggest going into the recipient only group, which donors can't view, and asking there, has anyone used this donor? Can anyone give me feedback? And also check the reviews actually listed on the site. And finally, Google the name on the site, see if they have any forum posts and what they say there. Anyways, that's all I have to suggest. So with that, I'll say good luck in your donor hunt.